freedom is not the highest form of wealth. Meaning is the highest form of wealth.
Being the sixth employee at a company that has an IPO is a dream scenario. Obviously, you get a huge payout from your stock grants, and you get the status of having taken a company public. But do these things really change the way you feel about your life?
I hit this wall where I said, what the f am I doing? Why do I want what I want? Is this truly what I want, or am I just getting pushed along with the tide?
Rick Foerster was a senior vice president at Privia Health, a VC-backed company that's now worth $2.25 billion. But despite his big exit, he still struggled to find meaning in his post-IPO life. In this conversation, we discuss navigating an identity earthquake, resisting the pressure to jump into the next thing, the importance of disconnecting from your existing routines, and finding joy in combining impact and interest. Now let's jump in.
So I joined Privia Health about 3 or 4 years after college as an operations associate, which really meant that I was a do everything guy. I was probably about 25, 26 at the time. And I really just had to do everything. It could be customer service, could be building board decks, could be running payroll, could be ordering coffee, just really anything that had to be done. And I really invested my entire self into this company. And I was just like, wow, this is like a fantastic opportunity. Let me go all in to this experience. And I was seriously committed, seriously invested, all in. And for those first few years, I mean, my career really took off. I really got along with the team, the founder, and just had a great experience. Then a few years in,
can I pause you there?
Yeah.
So it was a healthcare tech company, and was the meaning part coming from that it was healthcare? Like, let's say if it was cybersecurity or e-cigarettes or something, Juul type thing.
Yeah.
Was the meaning because you were solving a problem in healthcare, which leads to people having better lives?
You know, I would say it was definitely part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't say it was the entree.
Got it.
Like, it was kind of a side dish. And it was, over time, I was serving clinicians and I was serving patients. And that ended up creating a sense of meaning over time. But really, the core thing is I wanted to do something epic. That meaningless drudgery, like, do I matter in this world? I wanted to overcome that with an epic story, an epic adventure. Things like meaning or money too, ended up coming later on. And I certainly cared about that a little bit later. But really early on, it was like, I want to be actualized through my work.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was healthcare, it was serving people, I think helped me sleep at night, but maybe wasn't, I would not call myself like a hyper altruistic person, and I was just dedicated to this mission. It kind of pains me to say that a little bit. I sound a little bit like a mercenary in some ways, but like, I think that, anyways, that was sort of my angle.
Yeah. I think that we're going to come back to this is like, does meaning come from impact, right? I think that we're going to pin that conversation there. Say more about the epic part, because you said kind of the money would come after. So what did, you're 25, 27 at this point. What did doing something epic look like to you tangibly at that phase of your life?
Building a big, amazing company with a big impact.
Got it.
Around that time, I really become intoxicated with all the different entrepreneurs, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, and really fell into that craze. And, there was a lot of, in the 2000s, there's a lot of tech companies really blowing up, and they were becoming, a lot of the tech leaders were becoming the new figureheads of success in our country. Mark Andreessen, Steve Jobs, all the Bill Gates, right? All these people were very important figures. right? And that was my path. I was like, okay, like that's my vehicle to meaning. That's what's going to take me there.
Mhm. And
And
did that require, sorry, I keep cutting you off. Did that require like having a C in front of your name or having an exit or raising a certain letter size round or a certain employee, like I work at a 500% venture backed Series F, company.
yeah, I would not say it had like a direct number around it or a title. I would say that happens later. Comes later. But at the time, it was really like I wanted to be part of a mission that did something big and impactful, and I wanted to have a central role on that. And so
Okay.
the fact that I was an operations associate, as an example, I ended up getting promoted pretty fast. I was like, double promoted to director, and then like promoted to VP. And so I was very young when I had more senior roles in the company. And that was definitely a sense of pride. But I don't think it felt necessary as much as the impact part, being part of something big and doing something big.
Got
Now,
it.
later, is when a lot of that came into play, where after I left Privia, I know we'll talk about this, but by then I was senior vice president of a $2 billion public company.
Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video.
And so the next logical thing, right, when you're in that position, is you try and become a CEO or COO of a company that's going to become a $5 billion company. Or the founder title was always an important one for me because a lot of my idols, including the founder of Privy Health, were all founders. And so that was the kind of identity I was aiming for. I was on this path as a startup guy builder, and then it was all going to culminate in this founder CEO of an amazing company. And that was the pinnacle that was going to give me meaning.
I'm the founder and CEO of RadReads, a one-person company with one employee.
Well,
okay,
I think,
so
can I just touch on that fact? Because you end up going through this. This is what happened after I took time off. Is I ended up going through these cycles of, well, okay, all right. If I start a company, I'm going to be founder and CEO from day one, right? You could call yourself that. Now, how big of a company does it have to be, right? Like, can it just be a solopreneur staying? Like, is that good enough? Does it have to be multi-million-dollar company? Does it have to be 100 million? Does it have to have a B? Right? Like, does it have? You end up
never stops.
Think about these little variables, and you just end up saying like, and where am I going with all this? Like, this is pointless, right? It's never enough.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so you were at Privia, and there's a bunch of great financial events that happen in it. Private equity invests. I'm abbreviating your bio. The company goes public. You stay on after the IPO. How many years total? And you left. You were how many years in, or how old were you?
Yeah, so 12 years.
12 years. 12 years at one company is a very long time for. You're probably like a fairway millennial, like somewhere right in the middle of millennials.
I know. I could have had 6 jobs in those 12 years, right?
I mean, I'm 45. I'm Gen X, and the longest stint I had was 8 years, and that's a long time for young Gen X.
Yeah, I think I think it's kind of a shame, to be honest, where I wrote a piece on commitment, and because I think it's really important for you to commit at some point to something for a serious amount of time. And usually around the 2-year mark, when that sort of like early chemistry wears off, like things start to get a little harder. Like you have that
Yeah.
kind of nice little like honeymoon phase. Oh, new company, this is exciting, all this stuff. And then like 2 years in, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
politics, things are a little harder. I'm not the new guy anymore. And people
Yeah.
give up a lot at that
Yeah.
phase. And you have to sometimes power through. Now, there's always a balance, right? I'm
Yeah.
sitting here as a guy that quit. Um,
Yeah.
so there's always a balance, but I think that a lot of people in the millennial or Gen Z
Yeah.
generation are looking for too quick of
Yeah.
outcomes or results or satisfaction where you've got to commit to something to really figure out whether it's worth committing to in the first place.
I think you're spot on. Here you talk about this. We won't go down this tangent, but it's like a lot like marriage, where there's kind of that honeymoon period. Then you're like, oh, okay, this is for the rest of my life, and then aging happens in both parties, and then kids happen, and you're like, I'm fucking exhausted, um, and then you're
Yeah.
like, talk about a commitment past the honeymoon period. Because the honeymoon period goes pretty quick in the scheme of of marriage. Okay, so so the company does extraordinarily well. It goes public. You leave, and how do you describe? Like, are you financially independent once you leave? Like,
Yep.
what's your status after the run at Privia?
Yeah, and so I'm not going to go as far to say that I'm financially independent, but I was able to be very fortunate to create a lot of financial security for myself and my family. And that really gave me an opportunity to take some time off and explore and invest in my next steps. And so, really, for years, towards the end of Privia, I had been planning that I was going to take a few months off, 3 months off, get bored, and then start a company. Going back to right that founder pinnacle status, that was always the plan. And so the money that I was able to make in the IPO was always meant to be seed funding, get me through, the lean, hard years. I knew after seeing, especially the founder at Privia, how many years it took until he was able to, take a single dollar in salary. And I knew that to build a great company, you didn't want to really have to, make it a dollar on day one. You wanted to really have that time. So that was really the plan around the financial event, was to leverage it for that next big step
Got it.
that I wanted to take.
And when you had said like doing something epic, did you consider like when you had left? Had you checked off the epic box, or had the epic goal line moved?
That's a great question. The epic line moved for
The epic
sure.
line moved
um,
to being a founder, basically.
yeah,
Yep.
it was now in the history, right? Okay,
Yep.
it was now it's a good section in my resume,
Mhm.
and I'm very proud of that experience. And
And
grateful.
you're quite
and,
young, So
Yeah,
like
I'm
you
young. I
have a lot of
still have a
runway.
lot of time left, right? And it was great to have that type of success. And I'm so grateful for the experience. And especially because most startups do not. The story I just told usually does not happen, right? This is the
Mhm.
rare case, very common misconception of Silicon Valley, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
all these startups are NVIDIA and right. And uh, anyways, um, but yeah, no, it was in the past now, and now is let's ratchet up the ambition.
Mhm.
Let's take it to the next level.
Got it. So I suspect you are already at ambition level, like 8 or 9. So you're there's not much left on the dial. And so like a lot of times when people leave after their company goes through some kind of event like that, there's like a lot of mixed emotions. Like what were the emotions? These first couple months of not having to go to an office, having the semi awkward daycare conversations, explaining to your friends and your parents, what you weren't doing. What were some of the emotions that were going through you? And then just tell us, like, how many years ago? It was like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, a little bit over a year ago, June of 2023. So I've been, I guess it's 13 months or
13
so
months.
now. I'll never forget when I finally left Privia. I was done. That first week, I did a trip to the beach with my family, and it was an amazing vacation with my family because it was the first time in 12 years that no one needed me. My phone wasn't blowing up with calls. There was no email that I had
Slack.
to check. Bosses weren't calling me to say, "Oh, we got this urgent crisis you got to deal with," right? High growth startup, right? There's always some sort of crisis going on. And it was the first week where I was like, wow, this is fantastic. But the next Tuesday, I remember breaking down and crying to my wife, just thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. Nobody understands what I'm going through. And I'm all alone in this.
Yeah.
And of course, she was there for me and supporting, but it was just a very like I don't even know rationally where it came from, other than it was just this sort of emotional release of what am I doing? Is this the right decision? Did I make a mistake by leaving? Should I have stayed long? Did I leave money on the table? And it just
Oh
it
man.
very soon, had that moment of sensitivity, and I then used that and was like, okay, let's then shut the fuck up,
Yes.
emotions,
Yep.
and let's get building, right?
Yeah.
Let's get building companies. And so I really spent the next few months going deep on a bunch of different business ideas.
Wow.
I have a list of 100 different business ideas in a spreadsheet, and they're sorted by ranking in terms of, what I think is their potential and, their TAM and all this different stuff. And I got to work on that list.
So this was like so you had that breakdown. That was a week after, or 2 weeks after?
Week number 2.
So you worked your butt off for 15 years, give or take. You take 1 week, you take 2 weeks of vacation, and you lose it. Is that a fair distillation?
Yeah, I guess that's about right.
Which and I say that I always rely on humor as a crutch for more intimate situations, but I could totally relate. I was like, when I left, same question, like, did I make the wrong decision? Should I stay 1 year longer? What do people think of me? That was a big one. Yeah, like, who am I? Like, how do I introduce myself? And funny enough, this doesn't come up often in the lore of RadReads because it's not that I don't shy away from it, just that I found the right moment. It was so long ago. But I had a friend, shout out David, if you're listening, and he was like the confident entrepreneur. And he was like, we are going to start a mission-driven seed stage venture fund. And he had done tech, I had done finance. We were kind of caring about the world, so to speak. And it was the time to do it. And so I'm like, okay. And I was just kind of like, like a dog that won't leave his owner alone. I was just like that dog that was just like kind of following him around. And you probably wouldn't get that vibe from like Khe at RadReads, 10 years later. Yeah. I was like following him around, like, what do we do next? Like, what is it that we do next? And I was similar to you, where I just couldn't deal. I think, what's her name? Hermania Ibarra.
Yeah, Hermania Ibarra. Yeah,
Hermania Ibarra.
Working identity.
Like the uncomfortable middle or something, the messy middle.
Messy middle.
I couldn't deal with that messy middle. Yep. And so I ran from it first. So we did a 4-month trip around the world. So that you just run from it. And like, people can ask. I think the best part about leaving was that no one could ask me the question that I hated the fucking most, which is, what are you doing now?
Yep. Right.
So
Yep.
I could avoid that question for 4 months. Then I got back. I'm like, oh shit, that question's still there.
Yep.
And so then I was like puppy dog chasing on, the seed fund for about 8 months.
Yep.
And so I totally relatable. My timeline was a
Yep.
bit more stretched out because of the trip, but everything you're describing is me to a T.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things in there. I think that when I left, there were so many attractive opportunities that were very seductive. And, part of the issue was when I left Privia is I told people that I told exactly what I told you, which is I'm going to take a few months off and then I'm going to go back and start my own thing. Or maybe I'll join an early stage company. And so that ended up launching a slew of introductions and meetings and recruiter calls of people reaching out to say, oh, you're going to start a thing like, I want to invest, or, we've got the CEO opportunity that you would be great for. And, And, almost by habit, I was analyzing these opportunities to say, like, well, this is the next thing, right? And it's very attractive. The money, people think you're important, and all that stuff. And I think it's very hard to resist that temptation, especially
Yeah.
when you're on this unsettled ground of who am I, what am I doing, and not far away is a really nice, safe, and sound, comforting opportunity that will just shove away all those concerns.
And I'll tell you, I mean, I've worked with, in my coaching practice, a lot of exited founders, and you can go inward and live in that messy middle, but like with an exited founder, that's just, that's like a LeBron
Yep.
James talent. Like,
Yep.
that person's not going to be left alone externally from opportunities, and internally, just like, it's just starting a company is much easier the second time than the first time. Like, without
Yeah,
it,
right.
the probability for success skyrockets.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I
so,
think like
yeah.
all my mentors and everyone was like, Rick, you're so well positioned for this opportunity, right? You have some war chests that you can use. You have a good reputation in the field. You're considered an expert in the
Yeah.
industry. You have good connections. You understand how to build. You understand the customers, and you have all the skills now culminating towards this opportunity. And so it would be very easy, just without thinking, to just kind of keep walking down that path.
Yeah. Did you have like a fear of irrelevance, meaning like there was a shelf life? You're a healthcare tech person. I mean, you're a lot
Yeah.
more than that, but career wise, that, 3 months in the game, your story's still fresh. It's kind of like a house that sits on the market for too long.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
like they're like, something's wrong. We don't know what, but something's wrong with this house.
Yes, I know.
Did you have this like shelf life fear, relevance fear that kind of incited that part of you to go even harder?
100%. Yeah, well, a couple of things. One is a bunch of the, sort of mentors or leaders that, I really grew up following. One of them actually told me, uh, yeah, it's nice to take some time off, but don't take too much time off or
Mhm.
you'll be out of the game.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me. And so I had this clock, ticking around, okay, I gotta have that next thing lined up. A lot, right? A lot of the old advice is, right, hey, don't get into your next thing until you have, without leaving your current thing. So you gotta have this kind of like, right, you don't really, people in the old days don't have breaks between jobs. They don't have sabbaticals. You
You
line
and
up
I
the
are two
next thing.
misfits.
Right, I know. And so I think that was one thing where, that really stuck with me. And I do think that kind of question of what you do, right? Like it goes from I am, a healthcare guy, whatever, to I recently was to I used to be, right? And like, all right, how long can I use that?
Yeah.
um, and you really do fear irrelevance where I'm not important anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm not up on industry news. If I try and go back in, it'll be harder and people don't need me for advice. And so I think that fear is very real.
Can I be honest for me with irrelevance? Like if I had this like small newsletter when I left and it wasn't meant to be a product.
Yep.
It was just a passion project, RadReads, obviously. And so that was like a small like relevance tether, so to speak. But remember when I left 2015, I always situate people. Instagram stories didn't exist in 2015. So it just kind of like resets like where we are and
Right,
like
yes.
like forget
You were
TikTok
early.
and Substack.
You were early.
Like,
Yeah.
it was still like you just see a picture of your friends like avocado toast. Like that was Instagram. Like no like 800 Alex Hormozy videos. So
Yep. Yes. You were early. You're
That
you're on the
relevance.
frontier. Yeah.
And I gotta say, I mean, I think you and I have talked about this. Arthur Brooks quotes St. Thomas Aquinas, Aquinas, about the four false idols, money, power, fame, and pleasure. And I really did, and I'm fully honest, and I'm having my own kind of second existential crisis on this, but like I traded the money idol for the fame idol. And not fame like Mr. Beast fame, but like LinkedIn thought leader fame.
Yes,
Like,
sure. Yeah,
you know, and I honestly, I don't think I was like people will always say, oh, like it's so courageous or brave what you did. And like, thank you. And like, if you saw the inner workings, I'm just like, well, this drug isn't really working for me anymore. That like the drug being money. So let me try this new drug.
Right.
Fame,
You just move on to the
see,
new
like,
thing.
and I'm telling you, like, you're 9.5 for me. I'm like, okay, it's kind of like the money thing. Like, I get how the game's played. It's brutal. Like anything. Like if you want to excel in any game, it's brutal. Like I don't know what excelling in the pleasure game means. Maybe like Hugh Hefner, or Dan Bilzerian, or like one of one of those guys.
Yes. They're working hard. They're working hard at that.
He is working hard. But you excel in the money game, you know how hard it is. And then you also see that the prize is not as exciting as you thought it would be. Yeah. And like I'm definitely having this moment in the internet game where I'm like, I see how hard it. Like if I wanted to be in the top 1% or top 5%, an old kid would never do things that he could not be in the top 5% and with some, realistic runway. But if I want to be in the top 5%, even in my peer group, it's just I'm not willing to do the things that it takes.
Yep.
Right. Like, and then on the flip side of it, I always think of the story of Mr. Beast. Like, I'll be the most successful internet person in the world.
Sure. Yeah.
He lands in Chile with a hood and a baseball cap. He doesn't want anyone to see him. And one person spots him in the airport in Chile and takes a Snapchat of him. And within like 30 minutes, there's like 500 people surrounding him.
Jeez.
Like that's in Chile. Like imagine LA or New York City or
I can't handle that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert. I can't handle that.
So just like the prize isn't great either. And so, but so back to you, you're going through this. How does that chapter of like, I need to do something traditionally, I need to like stay relevant. How does that chapter flip?
Yeah, so I was kind of in that building mode, like I said, right after taking time off. And I did that really for about 3 months, working hard at exploring some of these opportunities. But it didn't feel right. I don't know if I can really explain, where those feelings came from, but it just sort of felt like, man, I'm getting kind of like, I'm rolling with the tide here, getting pushed in this direction. And I'm thinking, why do I well, why am I going that way? And really, after about 3 months, I hit this wall where I said, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
Why do I want what I want? Is this truly what I want, or am I just getting pushed along with the tide? And it was a very uncomfortable moment where, for 15 years, I had built up this pinnacle of meaning that I was aiming towards. And I was just on the precipice of getting there and launching it. And I'm climbing this mountain and I'm just like, but do I really want to keep going? And it was a very uncomfortable, uncertain time. I had so many questions about who I was. I particularly dug into this question of who am I without work?
Yeah.
Because my identity was all about work. I
Yeah.
worked really hard. I worked in work. And then when I was done with work, after work, I would read about work or I would think about work. I was, with my family, but my mind was still racing about work. I thought that this new work would give me something my old work didn't, right?
Yeah.
My ambitions, my plans entirely around work. And I just hit this wall of, well, wait a minute. Who am I if I don't have these things?
Yeah.
And I remember at that time, you mentioned leaving the country. I had a very opportune conversation. I worked with an executive coach while at Privia, and a lot of it was about like becoming an executive, figuring out office politics and all that stuff. But I reached out to her and Lair, and she had exited a company and become a coach over time. This is like 2000, before it was kind of cool to be a coach or come and I went on a walk with her and I told her what I was feeling and just things didn't feel right. And she said, leave the country.
Yeah.
Get out of here. Leave your bubble, your network, your rhythms, your connections. Get out of here, go somewhere else and disconnect. Now, I didn't end up leaving the country. Just for whatever reasons, we didn't want to, family, kids in school, all that stuff. But I really kind of took that advice to heart to say, okay, how do I disrupt the rhythms of my life and how do I disconnect? And so I cut off all those work meetings. I stopped researching business ideas, stopped taking recruiter calls or consulting opportunities, advising opportunities. Oh, we've got this opportunity for a board, blah, blah, blah. Very attractive opportunities, easy money. And I just said, no, I'm going dark. And that was then a period about 3 months of being in the wilderness and trying to find my way. Is really how I can explain it. Very, very strange time.
Yeah. Because I think most people listening, they're like, did you so you didn't go to an ashram. I suspect you didn't ingest like a ton of ayahuasca.
Maybe
what
should've.
does the wilderness mean when you live in a, Virginia suburb and have a young family?
Yeah.
Like what did it actually, what was like 2 p.m. on a Tuesday in the wilderness look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think I tried to disappear from as much as possible. Disappear from a network, disappear from a tyrannical calendar of appointments, disappear from obligations or commitments outside of my family. And I just cleared the deck. Open days, open calendar, see where the days would take me. And I did give myself a sort of 4-point framework. I called it the 4 Fs. because I'm a Foerster and I like alliteration. It helps me remember things. Um, so family and friends,
Okay.
spend time with my family, be involved. My kids are young. This is a no regret decision for me to just be there with my kids in this time because this era will end and, they're going to become teenagers and not want dad around. So family and friends. Two was fitness, where stress had really started to take a toll on me approaching 40.
Yeah.
And I really actually didn't know the stress I was living with until I took time away from work, where there's like this ball of like tension in my chest, is how I can make best describe. And I didn't even think about it. I was just like, this is life, I didn't even know it was there. And
Yeah.
then once I really took some time away, it just started dissipating. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what damage did I do?
I
What
know.
if I continued for 10, 20 years, would I have a heart attack? I don't know. So fitness. Three was fun, where I just prioritized pointless, selfish stuff that I shouldn't do or like feel guilty about. Not like weird, but like play a video game in the middle of the day, go see a movie in the middle of the day, like
What did you
opening
say?
of
You saw
Dune
Dune
2.
2 in
Dune,
IMAX?
yeah, Dune 2 IMAX opening day at 10:30 a.m. It was
That
fucking
sounds fucking awesome.
fantastic, right? I
Yeah.
had a great time. The old me would have been like, hey, does this
Yeah.
check the box on productive activity or not? You're wasting your time, etc. And I just did that stuff. And then the fourth was really reflection, which isn't F, but flexion. But anyway, I had to fit it in somehow. And that was just like, hey, write, take walks, take your time, and just get into this wilderness, not try and get out of it. You
Yeah.
mentioned Ibarra, The Working Identity, but another great book was William Bridges' Transitions, where he talks about when you're in a transition, you want to get into it, not out of it. And most people think of a transition as crossing the street, which is, as soon as I step off this curve, I have to get over to the other side as fast as possible. You don't want to sit down and in the middle of the street, right? Like
Yeah.
this is bad territory. So you want the object in a transition. A lot of people think is to get from this spot to the
Yeah.
next, and really instead just try to get into it. Okay, like what am I experiencing? Why? What's going on with me?
Yeah.
And it was not psychedelics, it was not therapy. Maybe I should have done these things. Maybe that those were guides that could have helped me on a straight line out of the forest faster. I don't know. But it's just the path I took.
So let's take the watching Dune. Like, if you feel guilty experiencing leisure, which I know I do, actually, a lot of therapy has recently broken me open there. But
Yeah.
like, you can't just, or I can't just decide, like, I'm not going to feel guilty playing a video game. Like, or I can't just decide, like, I'm going to go for a walk and reflect. Like, how did you actually shed some of those? I don't even know what, like, emotional walls.
I don't know. I think I just gave myself time and space to figure it out. We talked about this in your private community, but I'm known as like a hardcore operator. That's like
Mhm.
that was my like DNA. Like
Yep.
we're gonna have objectives and metrics and goals and plans and deadlines, and we're gonna like very predictably create the success and processes and all that stuff. And when I was going into my time off, I had that's kind of similar, like, okay, so 3 months out, I got to reverse engineer my timeline. So I got to, and it was not until I kind of took a grenade to that mentality just to be like, what if I just do the opposite of like no deadlines? no metrics, no goals. I had those kind of 4 frameworks were got like themes, but I didn't say, oh, I'm gonna lose, X amount of weight, or
Yeah.
I'm gonna learn a new language, or any, like, I just was like, hey, I'm just gonna kind of do these things. And it was only after I kind of just surrendered to this like openness of the experience that I was able to figure things out. So I don't know. Okay. I don't know how, I don't know if it's repeatable,
Yeah.
and so on. I know other people, guides, I think, but I talked to you. I talked
Yeah.
to my old coach. I did a lot of reading. Did a lot of reflecting, call it journaling.
Hmm.
Like those
Yeah.
things were maybe it's a do it yourself version
Yeah.
of finding your way out of the forest, but that kind of combination of things was able to help me
Yeah.
see it through.
Where did you land on the meaning question, like through that, and where and how?
Yeah. And just a little diversion. I know time freedom is a interesting topic you've written about recently. And you'll hear these sometimes financial gurus saying, the greatest form of wealth is not money, it's freedom. Right. And the best thing you can do with your money is to buy freedom.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's very valuable purchase, I will say. Buying
Hmm.
freedom is a very valuable thing, to buy your autonomy. But freedom is just a milestone. It's a sort of step along the journey. Because when you get there, what's next after freedom?
Hmm.
And so where
Yeah.
I go is, freedom is not the highest form of wealth, meaning
Yeah.
is the highest form of wealth.
Mm.
To really feel fulfilled and enriched on a day-to-day basis, doing the things that bring me meaning, not outcomes in my past that used to create me meaning, but
Mhm.
doing things that create meaning. And
Got it.
I've sort of narrowed this down. So my kind of the way I think about it is interest plus impact.
Interest was impact.
And
Okay. Oof.
interest is, what are the topics or areas or activities that I'm just naturally drawn to? And for everybody, it might be something different. For you, it could be podcasting. Maybe even part of it is surfing, right?
Mhm.
And everybody is sort of drawn to different topics or reasons. For me, I found kind of work as just I was just really interested in it for my
Yeah.
own reasons.
Got it.
And following those interests are important, but you need to combine that with impact around how can you give back and help people through those interests to really make a difference in the world. Um, and I really think that interest without impact is very selfish,
Okay.
but impact without interest is self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
So
Oh man. Oh, I have so many questions on this. So I'm playing devil's advocate on this from my own
go for it.
perspective, but from our
Yeah.
readers. I get that. I love how you say impact without interest is self-sacrifice. I think so many people, and I wasn't baiting you, but I was trying to see where you were going with like healthcare.
Yep.
Like, is that impact? Because what I remember hearing people like, oh, this was like 5 years ago. Like, I work on Twitter. We are making the world more
Yep.
transparent.
Yeah.
I'm making an impact. I'm like, do you
Yeah.
really believe
Yeah.
that? Like,
Yeah.
work at Twitter, get a great paycheck,
Yep.
solve interesting engineering problems, make a cool product, but like don't delude yourself into thinking that the world is a better place because of Twitter, right? They'd be like
Yeah.
Arab Spring, or it'd be like 2000 whatever
Yep.
election, like
Yep.
Myanmar, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I see how people like appropriate impact, like to stuff it into a box. And then I also see this other category. I'm curious, I people often hear impact and they think like eradicate climate change,
Right. Yeah.
make put more women or underrepresented folks on boards, or, take some developing country to bring it into the developed world. I mean, like your typical impact.
Yep.
And I feel like, and this is my opinion, that like people get really disillusioned because they'll say something like, I want to write a newsletter that helps Asian kids prepare for college interviews, right? Like the
Yep.
markets, I mean, that market's actually quite big, but, maybe
Yep.
pick like continental African kids apply for, college interviews in America. That's not a huge, like when you put that
Yep.
next to, or let's say, give a simpler example, like I work at my local community gardens,
Yep. Right.
right? You take that example and then you compare that with like eradicating climate change.
Yep.
You just like, you're always going to feel like you are not doing the thing.
Yep.
Right. So I'd be curious. And then on the flip side, I think you can have like a math teacher at a local high school has a tremendous amount of impact.
Yep.
And it's 30 students a year, give or take.
Yep.
Right. And so the challenge I have with impact is that it sends you down these like utilitarian rabbit holes where you have to be like, well, eradicating climate change is like 100 out of 100.
Right.
Local community gardens is a 3.
Yep.
Math teacher is a 22. And I think people like, I just think it's the wrong way to look at things, but I don't know how you, especially like Western Americans, like I don't know how you prevent yourself from looking at it that way. So I'm curious on your thoughts.
It's such an interesting discussion, and it's still, I think, the scale of impact is something I'm still grappling with a lot myself in terms of how big should my endeavors be, or how many people should I impact, or how deep do I impact them? Right? I'm still figuring that out. I think, you talked about a lot of things in there. I think one is that this term impact has been hijacked by corporations, Silicon Valley especially, basically to send people on, a crusade to make this company big. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that companies have deluded people, and then people have willingly deluded themselves into thinking that that is the answer. So I think that that's one
It's a
thing.
beautiful observation there. It's like a double delusion.
Yeah, I do. So I think that's big. I think that you start asking yourself these questions. Just scratch the surface of these a little bit. Okay, like, well, how many people do I need to impact? 1 million? Is 1 million enough? 5 million? 1 billion? Okay, maybe the reverse, that math teacher, right? Like, you can impact people deep. You don't have breadth, but you have depth. Well, is it like breadth times depth?
Yeah.
Like, and then these questions of like, well, work is a legacy, right? That legacy kind of comes in with impact a lot, and it's what remains, in that goes of eternity, and it's like, well, wait, so I have to become Socrates to like really be impactful here, like and so I just think these questions are important, but I think you can get really hung up in this sort of abstraction of what is impact and making a dent in the universe.
Yeah.
And one phrase I've been kind of using myself is scale down after you scale up.
Okay.
I went on this 12-year journey where we became a $2 billion company. We work with thousands of clinicians. We help it's like 4 or 5 million patients. And it was just like amazing that we were able to have that type of impact. But, my responsibility was actually, what I did was I was actually responsible for the health of over 1 million patients in my role. And that's so abstract, sitting there just being like, well, did I help somebody or not? Or like, what percentage? And instead, I've really just tried to say, in order to re-ground myself in meaning, is to say, instead of helping 1 million people, can I just help one? can I practically help somebody who is going through some pain, problem, experience, and literally help their life in a tangible, visible way. So I've gotten into kind of volunteer mentoring as an example,
I love that.
or I coach my kids, soccer team, right? Very, like helping around the community, like these things that are very tangible. And you know, through my writing, it's been very powerful to see people who reach out to me to say, this really spoke to me, really resonates. I'm going through the same experience. I'm thinking about taking time off. Can you help talk me through? Like very practically helping one by one people.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
maybe I take those learnings and then begin to scale that into something bigger. And this is something where my business building mindset goes, right? Which is sort of like when you're building a product, there's this terminology called product market fit, where you actually don't want to scale the company until you find who's our target customer, what's the product we're offering, how do we delight and, provide for that individual. And then when we get that secret sauce recipe down, then we can kind of take it and grow it.
Yeah.
Now, am I going back to the same trap that I fell in, and 12 years from now I'll be in, another situation here in another wilderness? I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, can I share with you some of the fresh thoughts that I'm having on this? So one thing that I've shared is like I work like 5 hours a day, but I think about RadReads like every waking minute, right? So we just use 5 to keep the math easy. So 25 hours, probably like 3 or 4 on the weekend. So let's say like 25, 30 hours of work on RadReads. And I have between one-on-one and group coaching clients, we have I think we have 15 people that we've served. So we've served 15 people and helped them through different phases of transition. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about today.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm so proud because I see so many changes.
Yep.
And I have a little bit of shame in it because I'm like, you spent all of your time, like the average net worth of those people. I mean, there's some outliers. So let's say median. The median net worth would probably be like a couple $1 million, right? So you helped, 15 millionaires be like a little bit happier or a lot happier, right?
Yep.
And I say this with like no disrespect to my clients or my practice or anything, but I'm like, okay, if you took all that time and mind space, I live, 15 minutes from Compton, right? And you channeled all of that energy and time into something related to Compton or Inglewood or, some of these like lower income areas that are literally adjacent towns, neighborhoods. Think about the impact that you could have made. And so I have a little bit of that. I don't know. I don't think I think your point is spot on. It's like, don't over examine that, because if you over examine it, you would end up in paralysis and just not do anything. And the fact that, many guests, but I think specifically of Joe Hudson on this podcast, like anytime there's an internal conflict, it's like your soul telling you to like look more.
Yep.
Right. And so if I feel a conflict for not helping poor communities in LA, like my soul's trying to give me some bat signal to look deeper, and I can take the signal and look deeper, or I can be like, well, this signal makes me really uncomfortable, so I'm just gonna like stay in my known lane. So that'd be one thing I would say about the impact question. And then the other thing with the scale question, right? Because I mean, you could argue RadReads, we probably touch, 50, 100,000 people some way, shape, or form. So that's a lot of scale for a 2-person operation. That being said, you look at Mr. Beast, right? It's like, he has more comments on his video than we have impressions across everything we've done all year.
Sure.
Right.
And how is he impacting people though?
Well, but even putting that aside, I think for me, and it feels like I'm putting words in your mouth, but it feels like you're kind of wrestling or asking the questions too, like I think scale is something that like everyone needs to question more deeply, because scale can mean, like, a lot of people look at me, they're like, the reach of what you do is incredible. And then I'm like, guys, like in my peer group, I'm like one of the like lowest reaching people in there. So like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So scale is all relevant, but I think scale also, like identity, ambition, like all these other kind of flashpoints that we talked about, like sometimes can be this like financial independence, time freedom, scale. They can be these like things to cling to,
Right.
but they're actually not a firm. They're not. You can't hold on to them. Like,
Yeah.
and so there's no conclusion there. I'm just kind of stating with like what I'm wrestling with, and maybe as a preview to what you might find yourself wrestling with, T+9 from here on out.
Yeah. I just also think that, I'm figuring this out, obviously. So I don't want to sort of claim to be someone who has all the answers. But at least for me, I think that, I say purpose is in the process. And a lot of us have been trained to seek outcomes. Achievement, is an outcome, but I'm going to do this thing and it's going to create this outcome. And that's what I'm going to aim for. And I think as we've experienced, you can kind of keep ratcheting these outcomes and it's never ending and they don't necessarily find fulfillment. And it's not that it's bad to try to achieve an outcome, but you still will feel an emptiness potentially, even when you get there. Even
Yeah.
if you maybe eradicate climate change, maybe
Yep.
that person still feels empty at the end of the day. I don't know, because
Yeah.
now they've got their solution created a whole other set of issues, right?
Oh, my coach would tell me
And
this all the time. He's like, visualize the thing you think will bring you, and like point blank, he's like, are you happy when that happens? And like your
yeah,
mind, you're like, no, because then I want to do that, right?
Yep.
Like climate change, then I want to fix like racism, right? Like
Yep.
eliminate racism.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Your list, right? You checked off the 100 problem, the
Yeah.
100. Well, there's next one, 99, sitting right
Yeah.
beyond the wings, and look how much more you could do. And
Yep.
God bless people who are attacked those problems. I try not to judge them, but at least from my experience, the purpose is in the process, which is
Yeah.
it's the doing the thing that really matters.
Yeah.
It is the type of work for me writing right now, as an example, or interacting or helping people. I just want to keep doing it. I don't know if you calculate this on a spreadsheet, whether this like perfectly fits the meaning criteria, but I just feel like
Yep.
it does.
Yeah.
I'm satisfied. I'm fulfilled at the end of the day to say I'm helping people. I'm doing the thing that I want to do, and really just focusing on the doing
Yeah.
versus solving a problem. Which it's hard to separate because you maybe focus on the problem, but if you just focus on I want to help people and I want to keep helping them, and I'm gonna keep helping them. And maybe what we're kind of saying is that climate change person, right? They are helping people and they're just gonna continue to help
Yep.
people after that. That's
Yeah.
different than I need to eradicate
Yeah.
climate change, and that will check the box for
Yeah.
me in terms of my meaning and like life, good,
Yeah.
success, right? Versus just the continuously helping.
Yeah. I love this. The last question, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, and we'll have to do a round two. If you were to go back to like that college graduate, self, you're about to enter the workforce, you're about to, enter this kind of existential crisis of adulting. You have financial constraints that don't exist today. And that person, that younger Rick, comes to you and it's like, hey, what's something I can do right now to figure out to come closer to finding meaning, given my life constraints? What would you tell that younger version of yourself?
I think especially when you're young is try not to think about the economic opportunity as criteria number one. Certainly we need to survive. And I'm not suggesting that, you just like this. Sometimes there's a lot of bullshit advice of like, go find your passion and,
Mhm.
you know, become a artist or a poet and just do that. Well, how are you going to fund? How are you going to
Yeah.
survive when you're doing that thing? But I think that so many of us are really trained to analyze opportunities by the success and especially the financial success of that opportunity, right? We analyze in the spreadsheet, and the answers are, it's cheesy to say, but kind of more in your heart, more in your feelings of, again, what are the things that you're just naturally drawn to that you want to do? And who are the people you want to help?
Yeah.
Just think about those things, right? What do you want to do
Mhm.
on a day to day basis and who do you want to help?
Yeah.
And I think there's more answers there.
Yeah.
And the only thing
Beautiful,
I'd say to
man.
them is
Yeah.
just chill the hell out, man, because, like, things will work themselves over time. You
Yeah.
don't need to figure out all this stuff right away. You don't need to
Yeah.
solve the
Yeah.
meaning of the universe day one out of college because
Yeah.
I
Well,
was definitely so pent up.
and that's where you come back to is like maybe this wraps it all up is like we were talking earlier about commitment. There is there's a commitment to finding meaning, and it's not something that happens 2 years after college. It's not
No.
something that ends once you have a financial event that
Yeah.
changes your life, right? It's kind of like I believe that I will be asking like my last breath, there will be some question of like, what was the meaning of this all? Right.
Yeah.
Like, and
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't say that in a bad way. I just think like that is my nature. And that is, I think that I don't know if it's human nature, but I know it's a part of human nature. And
Yeah.
so I do think that it is this ongoing, like play the long game, right? We always talk about playing the long
Yeah.
game
Right. Yeah.
of,
Well,
building
I think
companies.
what you said is profound, which is, meaning is not found, it is continually made over and over again, right? It's like the relationship you mentioned before, which is you don't just find your soulmate and then, oh, I can just chill and this relationship is going to be great forever, right? It's a lot of work and you got to keep working at yourself on the relationship and iterating, improving and assessing and all that stuff. And I think meaning, is a lot in the same way, which is you don't just stumble upon the meaningful thing and then done. You're going to have to continually work on it. It's going to evolve. You're going to have different chapters of your life, which, ebb and flow. You're going to have to take breaks,
Yep.
along the way. And just approaching it in a more fluid sense than a fixed sense, I think is important.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Rick, thank you so much. What a powerful conversation. You're so good at explaining things, and your story is just like super inspiring and also very resonant. So
Cool.
appreciate
Very
you,
cool.
man.
Absolutely.
Where
It was
can
fun.
our listeners and viewers go find out more? And we'll link obviously in the description.
Yeah. So the easiest way to find my work is theweightofwork.com. And I'm writing about how do we find ourselves in this world of work? A lot of questions of we're talking about now, identity, meaning. And I'm in the middle of a series about my time away. So if you heard a little bit more about the story here, but I just wrote a piece about unraveling the layers of working identity and who am I without work. So if you're interested, check that out.
Awesome.
That's it. Yeah, it was fun. It was a really good conversation.
Thank you, Rick.
All right, thanks.